And we're live, but not. Okay, great. Yeah, I think we're ready to
Yeah,
go. If you want to lead us off, John.
excellent. Hello and welcome back to the Rossi Brothers Sports Podcast. My name is John, joined as always by my brother Adam. And today, Adam, joined again by a special guest. Would you like to introduce her?
Yes, we're super excited today to have Heather Betancourt, who is that sports performance girl who has like four jobs. She knows all things sports performance and sports science, particularly as they relate to soccer and women's soccer specifically. You hail from the Pittsburgh area, correct, Heather?
I
Great,
do. I am in the dirty burg.
Dirty Bird, great place to be from. John and I have Pittsburgh
Oh, yeah,
ties
the Three
as well.
Rivers.
Yeah, do you play college soccer at Dayton,
I
Heather?
did. I did. I played 4 years at the University of Dayton. Go Flyers.
Go Flyers, go.
Flyers.
Super cool, super cool. So really excited to have you on the podcast today and excited to have an expert in the field of the National Women's Soccer League, definitely compared to John and I.
Yeah.
Cool. So excited to preview the NWSL. That is the National Women's Soccer League. We're recording this 1 week before the season officially starts. The excitement level on my
Yeah.
part is high.
Yep.
And I assume since you're agreed to record this with me, John and Heather, yours is
I'm
similar.
very worked up about it in an excited way. I am
Beautiful.
hype is real, and I'm just counting down the days.
Yes, let's go.
Nice. Yeah.
As I speak, um, friends of mine are touring as season ticket holders. They get a sneak peek in the new CPKC Stadium. They're in it right
Ooh,
now. Very exciting. So super cool. So I'm
adding to the
excited to
hype,
get this
right?
adding to the hype, adding to the
Yeah.
hype. Super excited to get this episode up very soon so our listeners can listen and preview appropriately the 2024 NWSL season. So let's jump right in. A few questions for us to consider and ponder here in our 60 minutes or so together, however long it takes. We'll see. By the end, you'll know because we'll record the
Yeah.
episode. Listeners, you can see how long the episode is. Great. That's kind of how it works. Okay. What is the biggest reason, Heather, that you are excited for this NWSL season? Why is your hype so real this year?
So I think my hype is mainly because I have a lot of personal connections to newer players in the league. So
Yeah.
one of my 17,000 jobs is I get to work with the youth athletes of the U.S. women's national team. And I have like 9 to 12 athletes that have now been signed to contracts in the
Wow.
NWSL.
Well,
And
congratulations. That's
thank
awesome.
you. We're very excited. Obviously, they are not like I haven't like worked with them for many years, but I do think it's one of those things where we're seeing such a dynamic and such a shift in what our league is finding value in, and it's getting our youth in as quickly as possible, right? And getting them into the club and developing with senior leader mentorship and having, while we still have the Kelly O'Hara's, we still have the Emily Sonnets, we still have these people who have kind of brought US women's soccer to the forefront are still on these teams. They can get the new talent that's coming in and really foster these awesome, skilled players and teach them how to be long-term professional athletes. And I think that for me is super cool. And I think that the draft class this year was predominantly like sophomores, freshmen, and juniors. Like we only had a small number of seniors, and I'm really excited to see all of the young talent and what they can accomplish. And I think my number one bold prediction is probably going to be the top three leading goal scorers will be either draftees or kids 20 and younger. And that's, I
Wow.
think, what I'm most excited about. So
Super cool. The young,
mhm.
the wealth of young talent. Yeah, very noticeable. I think we might have
Mhm.
chatted about this the other day, Heather, but I know the current signed I'm trying
Claire
to think.
Hutton, Alex Pfeiffer. Yep.
Yeah,
And yeah, oh no, Riley Jackson's in North Carolina, but there's
okay.
one that's in Kansas City. I can't remember.
Yeah, I know Pfeiffer and Claire Hutton. Were either of them your people that you worked with?
Yeah, I worked with Claire last year. And then I actually just recently worked with Alex in January before they went to the CONCACAF, the World Cup qualifiers. So I was with them
Wow.
right before they left. So that was actually my first time working with her. And she's one of those players where from afar, you're like, oh, she's probably fast. Her foot skills are probably okay. And then she gets the ball and you're like, oh, you're dangerous. Like you're scary. Like once you get outside the 18, like you just blink and all of a sudden the ball's in the net. You're like, oh, I get it. I get it.
Well, okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Excited
Yeah.
to see you next
Yeah.
Saturday.
Claire's great too. I think that you'll probably see Claire in a couple games just because she's a little bit older. And she's one of those girls that she looks so mature when she's on the ball, and the way that she's able to see the field and make the best decision in the middle of the field is just, I mean, she's like a 24-year-old in a 19-year-old body, which is pretty wild. So excited to see both of them play over at Kansas City. You can see them live. You can go to the games. How about that?
Yeah. If you want to see him live, you need a place to stay. You got a place.
There you go.
The Ruse got place for you.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
Super cool. John, why is the excitement level similarly high for you?
Yeah, to give people a background into some of my soccer fandom journey, I've been a lot more into it in the past like year or so than I was previously, having played at a very terrible level, but I didn't really watch too much. So my NWSL knowledge coming into this, I think I would wager to say is the least of probably the three of us. But I've been looking into it more and excited for the season to like actually follow. So this will be like my first season really following it. But looking at the teams in particular and like styles of play, which I've gotten more familiar with from watching some of the men's game, and the thing that I think I like most is a lot of like possession style. Really, the reason why it's called the beautiful game. A lot of the passing, control of the ball, working in offensively, stuff like that. And looking at some of the statistics of the National Women's Soccer League, the North Carolina Courage, pretty much top like all of the possession statistics and like passing, short passing, medium passing, and like accuracy and everything like that. And watching some of the like footage of some of their games from the past season, I'm very excited to follow them and be able to sit down and watch like multiple full games, follow through the season more. And get, I would say, more of that like really that style of play. I think is kind of my favorite, as approaching as more of a neutral. Obviously, I have connections to Kansas City, but otherwise, I don't necessarily have like a team yet. So I'm excited that I think they may be the team that I hop on board with, which is super exciting. So that's the biggest thing I'm looking forward to, again, more personally. But
as a current fan, I must ask. I did not look up stats such as those. Was Kansas City last on that list?
Gosh, I don't know.
Because I wouldn't be surprised if they were. Just as a fan, they do not possess the ball very well. They did not possess the ball very well last season. Honestly, they didn't the year before either. They're kind of like have like two opportunities to score both opportunities, and that's all you get per game. But anyway, okay. Enough of me ragging on my own team. I'm excited.
It's stylistic differences. There are a lot of, and some teams you watch are very interesting, of playing more of like a counter-attacking style essentially, and can be very effective.
Right, and it worked for them 2 years ago. They went to the championship game.
Yeah,
it decidedly did not work for them last year. Well, I'm excited to get to go to CPKC Stadium and watch the Kansas City Current in the first purpose-built women's athletic stadium in the world. That's really cool. It's cool to be able to say. And I think it's a big, significant step and a great thing for women's sports. I'll be a Debbie Downer. There are definitely problems with it. It's a complex thing. On the one hand, they didn't take any taxpayer dollars to make the stadium, which is great. On the other hand, I'm interested if that contributed to them making it. Originally, they said it was 11,000. I've heard some higher numbers since then, but the capacity is not huge. It's actually smaller than their bigger crowds that they got last year at the men's stadium. So I'm concerned about just the price point and who has access to games at the stadium. Um, I'm concerned about they have a sponsor for the supporter section and named it already, which is weird.
We
Yeah,
Like
the
just the supporter
whole
section specifically, it's like the
yeah, yeah.
Coca-Cola, I don't know, whatever it would be.
I forget what it is either, but they like announced like,
Okay.
oh, it's this. I'm like, what the hell?
that's like
Um,
not anti. That's like the you're supposed to just like have some random person with a drum name the group and then like that's
exactly,
the group.
Yeah, exactly.
right. So that's weird. Yeah, it's very obvious that the owners were like people who have a lot of money and were like, oh, I think they like Kansas City. And they're both here, which is cool. But I think they don't have a whole lot of experience like owning or managing a team before. I'm not sure, maybe I'm talking out of turn, but like just there's some weird things happening, especially with like personnel and the way that players have been um managed or mismanaged just in terms of like contracts, like signing a player and then trading him right away and just weird stuff. So yeah, it's by no means a perfect Cinderella story. I have some major qualms with what's been going on in Kansas City recently, but at the end of the day, um I am very excited about CPKC Stadium. Excited to watch games there. And yeah, 1 week from today, well, game will be over by now. Hopefully, be celebrating a current win over the Thorns, which is exciting way to get started
Yeah.
with the season here. Another exciting thing this year is that every single team in the NWSL has a new kit, or should I say kits, both primary and secondary. I forget who the kit maker is. You might know this, John, but it came out with new kits for every team.
Yeah, I just
So
had it.
so what?
Okay, go ahead. I say, yeah, okay, it was Nike. It's Nike.
Nike. Oh, of course, it's
Um,
Nike. Great. So new kits for every team. Those avid listeners on the Rossi Brothers Sports podcast know it is a something that John and I like to talk about. That is to
oh
say,
yes.
uniforms, everything sports uniforms. So John,
Styling and profiling.
out of 14 now, I have two new teams this year in the NWSL. That's another thing that none of us mentioned what we're most excited about. But yeah, excited to have the Utah Royals back in the league and excited for Bay FC to make their debut in
I'm
the
intrigued. I'm intrigued
Yeah.
NWSL.
by the situation.
Yeah.
The longevity is what intrigues me
Okay.
Okay.
In what way?
in the way that the reason it's going to be hard to get a lot of, I hate saying this, I feel like that girl, but diverse players to go to Utah. And that was the
Hmm.
problem the last time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Interesting.
Where
Okay.
you're setting a boundary of saying like, hey, you have to move here. And
Mhm.
if you are not fitting of the bill, it's uncomfortable and it's fun to some other people.
Yeah.
I think Amy's
Yeah.
great. I think she's going to do awesome things with the players that she has. But I think if we're looking long term, I see just a little bit of like, could we get exactly who we want, or do we have a smaller pool to pick from potentially?
Hmm.
And the Bay Area FC thing's exciting as well. And I think that the youth female soccer population for club is massive up there. And I think that having a local team where girls can go and watch high level professional soccer locally while they play it's one of those things that is just so crucial for development. And I think having that in their backyard is going to keep those teams that are at the top of the list as far as state performances go. And they're going to keep them at the top because they'll have access to that. So
Sure.
it'll be
Love
Mhm.
watching Alex Valera last 2 years in Kansas City. Difficult to see her go to Bay FC, but hoping for the best for her there. And yeah, and then another 2 years, they announced two more teams coming. The Boston Break, well,
Yep.
maybe it won't be the Breakers again, but a Boston team is back up.
Mhm.
And then St.
I say I only
Louis,
heard about Boston. Okay.
Denver,
Yep.
Cleveland. I've all heard in terms of it could be that next team. So
Yeah.
very exciting. Anyway, right now,
I hope Denver. That would be
I
like,
say let's go for
sign
Denver.
me up. I'm like, I move there. I'll get a job. I'll stay forever. Sign me up. So if anyone at NWSL is listening, just do it. Just pull the trigger.
at Denver NWSL team. Heather
Yeah.
Betancourt's your gal.
Yeah. And this
It's
is
a
my
good place to
resume.
be.
So maybe we can design their
That's-
kits for Nike in a few years. But as it stands, 14 teams this year, 14 new kits, or shall we say 28. John, what's your favorite?
Yes. I was going to say I'm not excited about Bay FC's uniforms, I will say.
Glad we're on the same page.
But yeah. There are a couple that stood out to me most. I will say, so for the secondary, there's a similar vibe to a lot of the different kits. They kind of have like a gradient thing, which normally I would say I don't like kind of gradient looks as much. But I think these look pretty good across the board. Um, so I want to shout out because I think my favorite of the secondaries is Portland's, specifically with the kind of like blue green like color to it with still having the red like badge. I think that's a cool look. But on the whole, I will shout out my favorite being Orlando, which
Oh,
is very I think surprising. It like I was initially looking at them like it's not usually my call to pick something quite so bold, I would say.
Mhm.
But I think that the citrusy vibe of like their home kit actually really like works. And I do like the kind of like purpley for their away as well.
Mm.
Yeah, which looks, I don't know. I think it looks really good. That's my shout out of my favorite, I think. Yeah, I don't know. The pastel kind of coloration with the citrus. I guess I don't know if it's like grapefruit or orange, presumably orange because Florida, but I mean citrus in general. Anyway, it's a very bold choice, I would say.
Mhm.
But like it actually works for me, which is surprising, a positive surprise. So
Yeah.
that's my personal pick.
Boom. I love it. Uh, yeah, I definitely considered that one. That was actually kind of one of my final two.
Yeah,
Um, I went with San Diego Waves primary kit, which has
so
a very similar vibe.
they say also
Um,
very bold.
yeah. I see Heather cringing here.
you
I'm
stole
I'm
that was mine. You took it from
oh,
me.
okay,
Oh,
cool, cool.
I agree with you
Um,
with anything. It's awesome.
okay, great. I'll let you talk about the jersey specifically. I will say that I'm a big fan of like 1990s NBA and just
Yep.
like a lot of sports back then. But if you look at any of the major sports leagues back in the 90s, colors were popping out the wazoo. Like it looked really cool. Major League Baseball might have been like a decade or two earlier. It might have been more like 70s, 80s. But I love all that color you got in
Yeah.
uniforms. And then it seems like a lot of teams made the switch where it was like gray, blue, red, muted tones, boring. And yeah, I just love all the color on San Diego's primary kits. I will also say I unapologetically rag on Nike a lot for ruining uniforms across sports, and I won't apologize for that because I'm unapologetic about it, and they do. But for once I'll actually compliment them. I think across the board, um, I'm excited about most of these kits. I think they did a really good
Yeah.
job all across the board. There are a few minor things I complain about. Yeah, Bay FCs are pretty boring.
Mhm.
But overall, I think well done as far as NWSL kits as a whole are concerned.
I would say, yeah, net positive, which is not always the case when Nike does fancy stuff
For
or
sure.
not,
Mhm.
I just new stuff. So yeah, I agree with you on that. I will just chip in.
Cool, cool.
Yes.
Heather
Um,
talked to me about the San Diego
well,
primaries.
my favorite primary was San Diego Wave, and which is weird for
Good
me
thought.
because I hate colors as I sit
Mm.
here in black, and I love black. My biggest beef in general, and I'm sure this will come as no surprise to either of you, is that we don't get to see any of the goalkeeping jerseys. And if you want to talk about
Mm.
drift in the 90s, if you look at any of the Premier League, any league, or even
Mhm.
World Cup level goalkeeping jerseys, the drip was hardcore in the 90s. Keeping jerseys. And like every time I see them, I'm like, God, I would just wear that with a pair of jeans today. Just send me out to
Yeah.
public. But we
That's
won't know what
awesome.
those look like until in game. So I'm waiting
Ooh,
patiently.
better tune in.
Is
How about
another
that?
potential most excited for, runner
Yeah.
up or
Yeah, there you
So
go.
honorary
many
mention?
reasons to be excited.
Goalkeeping
Yeah.
jerseys. Also, I'm concerned with what color the refs are going to wear for any of these games, as these are all
Mm.
neon jerseys this year.
I said the rest will be wearing black now.
I know, honestly, they're
Yeah.
going to have to because that's going to be the only color they'll have to wear. But my runner-up primary was actually the Seattle Rain jerseys because I just was something about the navy and the gold. It was classic. but the Navy had just like you said with Orlando, it's just a little bit of like a weird stitching and a little bit of a pattern in it that just gave it a little bit of dimension. And I had a 10 stars for that underneath my San Diego. And then my favorite secondary was actually Racing Louisville. It was the purple. It was the weird purples. I just was like,
Oh
ooh, it's
yeah.
purple, but it's like kind of baby purple. It's like lavender, but is she there? Is she a starry night? Who is she? She's like a flash of light running down the field, and I liked it.
I would shout out the Argyle for that too. I'm a
Yes.
sucker for Argyle.
We're on the same page, John. That was probably my runner-up, was Racing Louisville's primary. I like, and it's similar to what they've had in previous years too. I'm a pretty big fan of Racing Louisville's look. As we'll get to, I'm also a pretty big fan of Racing Louisville's team. If I had no if I were you, John, if I was like coming into a league with absolutely no geographic or prior affiliation, and I was picking teams 100% based on just like complete objectivity, in the NBA, San Antonio Spurs all day, in the NWSL, Racing Louisville all day.
Okay.
But in terms of picking players, i.e., who's the best player in the NWSL, I was talking about Sophia Smith with Heather the other day, and she kind of made this face. She's like, "Come on, there's so many other players out there." And so this is the question I posed to you. Tell me why Sophia Smith is not the best player in the NWSL.
So my biggest thing is it's not any hate on her because she's fantastic. Like,
Agreed.
we can all agree that she is doing everything she possibly can to be as amazing as she can. But I fear that now with the situation in Portland, where they've taken some other players have left, right? Who's going to support her the best, right? So that's my biggest, I guess, rebuttal to your, oh, she's going to be the best again in the NWSL. We're also looking at, Mal Swanson returning. And again, does she have a lot of support in Chicago? Yes or no, but she was on a tear before she got injured. She was looking to be the person who scored the most goals in the NWSL last year before she got hurt in international play, right? So on top of that, you have Jaden Shaw, who has scored a goal in her last 4 games with the women's national team, coming to San Diego, playing with Alex Morgan and a really deep team as well. So I just feel like if we're talking about best player, there's a lot of people that play in that 9, in that 10 position that are excellent. It's just going to be who's on their team to support them. On top of that, you have Gotham, who is literally just rostering every single top level player from defense all the way up. So if we're talking total player, we could even make some arguments for some of the defenders that they have being excellent wingbacks that are supporting the attack and creating opportunities. And I don't know, Esther Gonzalez is now on Gotham. She's come over from Spain. So like that girl could pop off and we could have something wild coming from her. Trinity Rodman, 10 stars. But again, Ashley Sanchez, they traded her to North Carolina. That was her number 1 assist, was Ashley Sanchez. So now she's gone. Will she be productive? I just have questions. And I think Sophia Smith will be up there in the top 7 as far as like goal scoring goes. But I do think that with the loss of Sonnet, with, maybe some of the returning players being a little bit older, maybe the speed of play not being up to where it is with the national team, and she can find those breakthroughs laterally and find, the opportunities through the middle. I just don't know if she's going to be as like polar as she was last year in the year previous, if that makes sense. I just don't think it's going to be like that. Oh, who's the best player? Oh, Sophia Smith, drop the hat, move on. I think it's going to be more of a conglomerate of Jaden Shaw's in the mix. You have Mal Swanson, you have Trinity Rodman, you have basically the whole Gotham roster. You have Midge. I mean, you have Sonnet. It's just going to be turmoil in a good way. And I'm excited about it. It's going to be wild.
For sure. Yeah, it's a pretty insane team. As we'll get to. I'll confess, I'm not, let me put it this way. Out of like major team sports in the US that are popular, I've watched the least soccer. I've really only been an NWSL fan. This will be my 4th year now, like pretty much since Kansas City's had a team again. And prior to that, didn't watch a whole lot of soccer except Italy World Cup 2006. And yeah, so I don't really feel like I'm a good watcher of soccer yet. I guess in 2 ways. One, I'm really a current fan, not an NWSL fan, in the sense that like I've seen every team in the NWSL play against Kansas City. So I have a small sample size when I'm judging other teams. Um, Two, I watch the ball. Like, again, didn't play soccer at a high level ever. Haven't watched enough soccer to really know what to look for. So when it's just whatever pops out at me, right? I'm a pretty casual fan, um, in that sense. And I will say in that sense, last year, well, in back-to-back games, in the championship game the year before, Sophia Smith scored a pretty early goal and really seemed to kind of put that game away early on, even though it wasn't technically away, but she put a damper on Kansas City's spirit there, right there. And then the next game, well, home game, we played North Carolina first last year, but then played Portland at home, and Sophia Smith goes off, scores a hat trick, and watching that game, I thought, oh my goodness, like she's next level. Just took over in a way that it's hard to do in soccer. I think you see basketball players sometimes just completely take over the court, but she just took over in a way where I was like, wow, that's insane. So this is all to say, yeah, props Sophia Smith. In no way was this question designed to say that you're not great, but I'm gonna give some love to the defenders in the world. And I'm actually gonna go out there and say, why is Sophia Smith not the best player in the NWSL? Because her teammate, you could throw any players in a lot, not any players, but many players could back this title. I'm gonna throw her teammate Naomi Girma
Yeah.
into the pool as best player in the NWSL. Defensive play, doesn't maybe stand out to a fan as casual as me. But that's not to say that it's not important, right? It's not flashy, but man, I remember again, I was watching the Current. So last year I was watching the Current play San Diego at home. Current lost 2-0. And I remember watching the game thinking, like, I think we have better players. Like, I think we can. I don't know, just watching the ball. I'm like, I feel like our players look better than theirs. And at the end of the game, I was like somewhat confused that we lost 2-0 based on that. But upon further reflection, I realized this. No, me was what a uneducated soccer watcher. I think when I said we have better players, I think I meant we have better forwards and
Mm,
maybe a better midfield. We decidedly did not have a better defense. San Diego had a much better defense, particularly that early in the season, because Kansas City's defense was bad. We had several injuries on the defensive line. We also had a lot of youth on the defensive line. By the end of the year, I thought we played a lot better. Shout out Gabby Robinson, West Virginia Mountaineer. Excited to watch her in the future. She improved a lot. But at that point in the season, our defense was suspect. And San Diego's defense was rock solid.
mhm.
And I remember we had an insane number of shots that game, and people I was with were walking out of the stadium looking up stats on their phone, being like, "How did we outshoot them like 3-1 and we didn't score? Like, what the heck?" And looking back on it, I'm thinking, we did have a lot of shots. Were any of them good shots? Were any of them shots on goal? Were any of them good opportunities? Absolutely not. I felt like the entire game we had no real opportunities to score, whereas San Diego had at least two because they scored two, and they were very clear defensive breakdowns. And this is all to say that I realized, reflecting on that game, the importance of excellent defenders, even if they don't necessarily stand out to the casual fan that hasn't played the sport and knows what's going on back there and can't see this technical stuff. So Naomi Girma, even to a casual fan, stands out as like, okay, she knows what's going
Mm,
on. But as I dug a little bit more into this player, I'm thinking, okay, she's a real
yeah.
legit stud. And the accolades speak for themselves. People in the league know it. She was rookie of the year 2 years ago. She's only been in the league for 2 years. She was
Yep.
defensive player of the year both years. She was
Yep.
the the U.S. national women's player of the
Yep.
year
Mm,
last year. She is
that's fine.
truly next level. So yeah, I want to give some love to her. Also read a little bit about her story, and realized that she won a national championship at Stanford. Her teammate at Stanford, a goalkeeper there, Katie something, forget her name, committed
Okay.
suicide shortly after her being drafted NWSL to Naomi's draft NWSL, and she does a lot of work around the mental health now, and kind of point out that mental health is health, right? And really cool. So I'm cool of Naomi to be working on that, and yeah, just a big fan. So give us some love to the defenders. Naomi Gurma, she's my pick for best player in the NWSL. John, who you got?
Yeah. So I didn't necessarily pick a different our best player, I guess. I
Ooh.
maybe read it a bit differently of more so I think what you were talking about, Heather, of like why like argument for it not being Sophia Smith in the sense of like I think there are a couple different ways you can approach it of where you're talking about like service. So I did look up a bit of expected goals numbers. And right, like combining expected goals and assists. Morgan Weaver, who's also on the Thorns,
Mhm.
has like right the underlying numbers, I guess, are similar to Sophia Smith's in the sense that like she's putting up the same number of opportunities and goal scoring. Um, there's an argument to be made again from like the very nerdy like I can't play soccer but sitting in my basement watching numbers of people who do play soccer of like um for Sophia Smith of like outperforming your expected goals is like
Mhm.
generally if you're good at finishing, which she obviously is, you're going to score higher than like the opportunities that you're given. um but yeah, there are arguments to be made number wise that like or even if she is the best, that it's a lot closer with other right like forwards, and again that's talking with like goal scoring numbers compared to also right again like you're talking about having midfielders or defenders. Goalkeepers can be absolutely critical for um a ton of right like it's you know no matter how good your team is, that can like make or break so much of your season. um so it's what you look at as just like best player. I don't know. I think you almost have to break it down into positions or other things like that to really kind of get into um, who would be the best. Um, yeah. So I guess I didn't pick one other player necessarily. Um, I will say you mentioned Midge Purse.
Mhm. Yep.
Um,
She's a queen, rock
she's
star.
really freaking impressive.
Yeah.
um I don't know about like some of the numbers necessarily underlying that or anything, but watching some of her like highlights and um everything, I'm like, wow, she's legit.
Yeah, I mean,
um
even if you just look at her in the final last year, I was like, where, hello? I was like, are you okay? I was like, girl, it was nonstop. It was up and down, assist, goal. I was like, girl, you're on it today. You just woke up and you chose violence. You said, this is me. And she's been doing that since. And I think that, I mean, she's on my, obviously wrote like a massive list of all these different things. My ADD was swirling with players in my brain, but like, I put her at the top of my Gotham list with everyone that I think will support her underneath and like make her be
okay,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, yeah.
it seems like it. So anyway, that's sorry my slightly for answer to the question or not.
So
I guess I would put her as my personal pick again with limited knowledge,
I
but
the
like it.
that's a
yeah.
solid pick. Um, and it's kind of a good transition because our next question was pick to win it all. To the casual listener out there, people might not be super familiar with the NWSL or women's soccer in general. Some names that you might have heard thrown around this podcast, or you might have even heard before this podcast, such as Midge Purse, right? Such as Kelly O'Hara, such as Emily Sonnet, Lynn Williams, Rose Levesque, Crystal Dunn. List goes on here. I do want to point out they all play for the same team.
Yes.
Okay. And it's kind of scary. But I gave myself the easy one here to go first with the pick to win it all. But New Jersey, New York, Gotham FC just like went out the wazoo this offseason and just signed like half the women's national team.
Mhm.
So it's an easy answer. I kind of want to pick someone else, but I'm like, I can't honestly justify doing that just based on the insane roster that New York, New Jersey's put together. I think the NWSL started in 2012, but with 8 teams, this has to be the best roster on paper in the history of the NWSL. Now, does that guarantee a win? Absolutely not. As a soccer fan in the last, NWSL fan, current fan in the last 3 years, I have learned that being the better team, I think less so in soccer than the other sports, means a result.
Mhm.
And I like that about soccer. You can go into a game and know that you're outmatched, but come away with a result, which is kind of exciting. But they got to be my pick. There's yeah, I think whoever else again, there could be other picks and other reasons why, but in terms of roster, the second best roster I think is pretty far behind New York, New Jersey. So they're my pick. They're my pick.
Uh,
Yeah.
Go Bats. That was my pick too. Go Bats. I feel like, not even talking about the people that they have I mean, they have half of the national team roster, but they got Esther Gonzalez. They have Farley from the Ireland national team. Like, they have really good players. And on top of that, they have options, right? And so I think it comes down to, yes, they have the best roster, but they have such a deep roster, right? So you can go game to game and interchange people and give them rest and try new things and really preserve who you think is maybe at the top for you without making them exhausted the whole season. You can make changes, you can make rotations. And I think that's when you're dangerous, right? When you can rotate your nines, rotate your tens, make sure your sevens and your eights aren't murdering themselves, and you're getting a little bit more diversity in your game profile rather than hammering the same roster with maybe one or two tweaks every week, right? And I just feel like it's just going to be hard to withstand them long term. My secondary picks were San Diego and Portland. I think San Diego for me is a clear second, like under Bats. So I was like, I like the roster. I like what they did last year. I thought they looked strong at the end of the year. They obviously just weren't strong enough, and that's okay. I feel like they're going to come back this upcoming season with a little bit of like a chip on their shoulder, and I think that would be a motivating factor for them. Same with Portland. You could make the same argument. They had a great season. They made it far. They did everything they were supposed to do. It just was that final hump. They couldn't get past it, right? And I think that also we'll set them up in a really good position. How the trades went for them, they didn't luck out as much as San Diego. I feel like what they got in the draft versus what San Diego got and what San Diego still has. I feel like San Diego won that battle, but I do think that with some of the returners, with the coach, with everything else that they have available to them, it's going to be close over there in the West, between San Diego and Portland, with the clear Eastern winner being Gotham, for me. So
Boom.
Okay.
2 for 2.
I'll join the chorus and also say Gotham.
go Bats.
3 for 3.
I considered, so right, you have both the like league, just like regular season winner, and then also the like playoff winner.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think they're probably favorites for both of those. In my mind, I'm thinking like, oh, well, because one of the things, right, as you mentioned, Adam, in your best player like pick, San Diego was very solid defensively last year, gave up some of the fewest goals overall in the league, and it seems like are going to return similarly organized defensively and everything. Which in a playoff like elimination format does I feel like tend to be pretty favorable. And like again, in my familiarity with like league tables versus playoffs, oftentimes right, people think or talking about like even World Cups and stuff like that. Having a more solid defensive game kind of helps you go farther sometimes in more of a tournament setting than in like a throughout the whole length of a season. So you could make an argument. I don't think it's I'm not going to go so far as to actually make that argument, but I think you could make an argument that they might be more favored in a playoff format versus overall in the league. But I agree with you on the kind of clear top pick. I don't have too much to add beyond that.
I'm glad you
Yeah.
mentioned Portland, Heather. Portland's a team that, again, in my 3-year fandom, the last 3 years, they were the best team to my eyes. I think they had the best roster. But more than that, like they're the team that scared me. Every time I watched them play Kansas City, we got not just outplayed, but extremely outplayed, including last year when we beat them 1-0 in Portland. They were missing 4 players to the World Cup. We were missing one. I still thought they outplayed us. We were able to get a result, even though I thought they kind of outplayed us in a way that I'm not scared of other teams. All right, New York, New Jersey last year won the NWSL title. The game I watched them play in Kansas City, we won 2-0, controlled the whole game. One of the better games we played all year. Last game of the season, we played them in New York, drew with them 2-2. I might have even given us the edge in that game. They didn't super scare me. The year before it was Seattle that won the Shield, right? They didn't scare me. We beat them in the playoffs to go to the championship game, whatever. Portland was the team that just put the fear of God to me. And I think this year people are going to look at that roster and say, okay, I mean, what we're saying is not like a hot take. New York, New Jersey is the odds makers. That's their pick, right?
Right.
But Portland is still, to me, they're kind of like the Steelers, and that's a team that I really don't like. Sorry, Heather, but every
It's
single
okay,
year
but they're
I'm
annoying.
scared of them and I
Yeah.
respect them. And I'm like, at any point they
Mhm.
could win, and I never am going to count them out. And I think in the same way, Portland this year, people are saying like, oh yeah, it's San Diego, it's New York. Um, don't count Portland out. I think they're a good organization that just finds ways to be dangerous
In
in most
Laura
of them.
Harvey. I mean, she was in talks to potentially start interviewing for the women's national team job, with Emma
Mhm.
Hayes. Like those were the top tier of the situation we were looking at. And like, I mean, I haven't been in this, soccer, the higher end soccer circuit for very long, but coming across multiple coaches that I've worked with, I've never heard one bad thing about her. I've had players that have done trained in the summer with Portland, and again, nothing but good things to say about her. I had coworkers that have worked with her, when she was in Utah, and like again, like heard nothing but great things. And I think that like that's something to be said, especially in women's soccer. When you have we used to say this in college is you have two different types, right? You have a really good coach with maybe like a mediocre roster, but you would do anything for that coach because that
Mm.
coach is just like it for you. You're like, I am emotional about you. You are my figure. I would die for you, right? And then you have the opposite where you have a horrible coach who treats you like absolute garbage and knows nothing, but you have really good players and you bond together to say, you know what? F that person, we're going to link up and we're going to make this for us, right? And it's like the hyper opposites. And I think that sometimes you have the in the middles, obviously, but in their case, I just think, why wouldn't you want to play great for her? She
Right.
seems amazing. She has a system. She's obviously stuck to that system every single year because, like you said, every year they're just dangerous and they're just good, no matter who's on the roster. So that's a testament, I think, to her methodology with her players and sticking to her system and knowing that, like, she can connect with the players. She can make sure that they're working from beginning to end on what the goal is, which is winning games. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a sleeper team, Portland.
Yeah. Watch out,
Mhm.
people. Well,
Mhm.
I will certainly be watching. Very excited about it. We're gonna end with this question: what is one bold prediction we have for the upcoming NWSL season? John, you go first.
All right. So I guess this could be phrased in a number of different ways, depending on how bold I want to make it. Um, the most bold, which, why not go for that? But the most bold, I will say, is that the Houston Dash will be involved in every single 0-0 draw of the season this year. There will not be a 0-0 draw that does not involve them. Um,
It's
they
great.
both gave up and scored the fewest number of goals, and were involved in almost half of last year's nil-nils. I kind of like a nil-nil draw personally. Like I mean, some of them can be boring. Some of them can be very interesting. But I noticed that when looking at this, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was gonna say probably the like more reasonable but still maybe bold prediction would be that like they'll account for 50% of them, or like the majority or whatever. But yeah, I'm gonna go out and put my stake my claim on that as a somewhat statistical anomaly. Yeah,
That's
and also,
fantastic.
I like goal scoring. I like there to be, right. If that's the case, then there'd be goals in pretty much all the other games, which is nice. So that's my shout.
That is super fun. Like that is something. So last night I went and watched West Virginia women blow out Cincinnati Bearcats for the third time this season. Let's go Mountaineers!
The Mountaineers.
And dragged my friend Jack with me, and he I think is just a good friend and was there, but didn't really have a whole lot of stake in the game. But they had this like thing on your phone where you could like follow along, and he was like playing bingo and stuff. And there was like one random player for Cincinnati that he was like, "Oh, I need her to get one more rebound," you know? And I'm not like super into like fantasy stuff, but it was kind of fun that he was like that engaged with that particular thing. Whereas I don't think he really knew a whole lot about women's college basketball. And I feel like that is a thing that even me, as a current fan for sure, NWSL fan to a certain extent, I might be looking at that now. I'm like, okay, nil-nil draw. Was it Houston? Was it not?
It
Like
wasn't.
that's something for our listeners out there that might be able to
I was gonna
follow
say,
with some
you follow
interest.
along the season, you can just
Oh,
keep an
wow.
eye on that, see what happens. I
But
would say the
look
more
at the
interesting
spread
thing
for
to
that.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love it. I love it.
Crazy.
I'll use the like majority as a benchmark, I think, and if they're involved in the majority of nil-nil draws.
Mm,
No.
mm.
The other thing that I wanted to shout out is that I think Washington, I don't think this is like that bold of a prediction, so I'm not gonna say it, but like they didn't make the playoffs last year. But looking at their numbers, I think they should. You could argue that they should have.
Mhm.
They like were one of the, again, based on like underlying numbers, seemingly unluckiest teams. Like they underperformed their expected numbers by about the most, and we're also only 1 point away from being in the playoff spots and everything.
And only six
So I think
points
that's
away from
necessarily
being the top
particularly
seed.
bold. What's up?
And only 6 points away from being the top seed, or 7 points away. It
Yeah,
was like it was so crowded at the
it was
top
really
last year.
tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like they are a team that I would also want to like shout out and point to as like I think they're pretty good. Would like as someone just joining, not knowing too much, I'm like they seem primed to do better than they did last year.
Yes.
I think the new coach, I think the coaching hire is going to be a push, and it's going to push them in the right direction. And I would agree with you that that would be a bold prediction as well, to say like they could finish in the top three, top two as well if they can get it together. So
Boom.
wow.
Is
Okay.
that your bold prediction, Heather? Yeah.
No, it's not actually. Mine was that new talent is going to overshadow all the veterans and
Oh,
anyone
right.
who's and like I that's like my player based prediction. I do think that, and I hope that viewership and attendance records, I don't want to say that because I don't think viewership is going to be bigger than what it is for the MLS, simply because of the Apple TV deal and how accessible it is. I think Paramount Plus is garbage. If you tried to watch the women's national team game the other night, it was the worst stream. I wanted to watch it in Spanish instead, and I did when I
I
went to
can
watch it in
back
Spanish.
that up, having watched a couple streams on there. It's not
And so
great.
I think that potentially will deter people away from like having access to it. But I think that we're going to see, I mean, a huge inflation from last year, especially with the addition of the new teams. We have all this just youth in here. We have players from overseas coming in that are really popular. We have huge contracts. I think that there's just going to be a lot more competition and better, kind of like I think what you were saying, John, about the style of play. I think that the style of play is going to be more like the beautiful game, and we're going to see more build. We're going to see more possession. And I think that viewership and attendance is going to be obviously a record year because there's more teams, but I think that it's going to be above what they project it should be. And so I don't know what that number is, but I know I want it to be like substantially higher. And I wish it was more than the MLS, because that just, to me, would make me happy. And I would kind of like stick my tongue out and go like that, like sucks to suck. But, it's because it's Women's History Month. I get all worked up and, feral female about it. So.
Oh, yeah, happy Women's History Month.
We're recording one day after International Women's Day.
Yes.
Exactly. It was great. I was like, wow, this is all working out.
Very appropriate. Maybe I am a pretty, I think, positive dreamer in terms of some things, but I wouldn't be surprised if one day in my lifetime that happens, if we have a season where the NWSL outperforms the MLS in terms of viewership. But yeah, maybe not while the NWSL is tied to Paramount Plus. But it's cool that they have, several games on ESPN, ABC, CBS this year, which would be exciting. Now I'm just thinking like, man, maybe the younger crowd, I'm kind of 80 years old when it comes to technology. Maybe the younger crowd here, the streaming services are really the bigger deal. Like the MLS has found out it's not so much being on cable anymore. Anyway, that's an aside. I got a bold prediction to wrap it up, and that is this. Well, it's not this. I'll get to it. Portland Thorns, like I mentioned, super scary. A team I have a lot of respect for in terms of their style of play. There is one other team in the NWSL that whenever they play them, I'm like, they are so annoying to play against. They play like the Thorns do. They don't have the roster that the Thorns had. They have not gotten the results that the Thorns have gotten consistently over the years. They're a much newer team than the Thorns. They have never made the NWSL playoffs. My bold prediction this year is that not only will they make the NWSL playoffs, again, going back to John's thing, it depends on how bold you want to be. It is a slight bold prediction for me to say they're going to make the playoffs. If I want to be super bold, I'm going to say they're going to be a semifinal team. They're going to be one of the top 4. And that is, ready for it, Racing Louisville. I love the way
That's not far off.
I love the way they play soccer. They have improved over their seasons. They've gone from terrible to mediocre, so it's not as significant as going from like, or maybe not as people don't see it as much as when you go from like mediocre to really good. But the trend is there for them to continue that climb. I don't know much about soccer, about the sport itself, but when you play them, you notice as soon as Kansas City loses possession, which is very often because they're not very good at keeping possession, Louisville's there. And they play this like pressing style. They're always like in your face. It's a really active way to play. And I remember thinking whenever we play them, like, man,
football.
If we played like that, like Kansas City's roster last year, if we like adopted that style, I think we do a lot better. But who's me to say? But I just think it's really fun to watch. In years when we finished, well, actually that's not true. 3 years ago, and last year we finished below them in the table, but 2 years ago when we finished above them in the table, they still beat us last game of the regular season in Louisville. They're just always like pestering and like always there. A lot of respect for them, and I would be happy to see them do well, especially in their beautiful kits. So that's my bold prediction. They're going to the Final Four this year. Shout out Racing Louisville.
Racing all the way there.
Oh, yes. Gonna do it.
Oh,
There
I'm
it
so
is.
sorry.
No, thank you, John. It's one of your many gifts to the world. And man, the gifts hopefully will be many from the NWSL this season. Been super fun talking with both of y'all. Thanks so much for joining us, Heather. Appreciate
you guys for having me. It's great.
Yeah, appreciate your expertise and
good.
your excitement.
Looking forward to the season.
Yeah, 1 week away. I'm going to work on getting this podcast up there very soon, so all our dedicated listeners can listen to it and be following Houston's quest for the involvement in all 0-0 matches. Great. I think that's all I got for you. Let's go start watching some women's soccer.
Here we go.
Amen. Sounds good.
Well, from the banks of the Missouri to the Rockies of Colorado, thanks to all our listeners from points in between and not in between. Until next time, he's John and I'm Adam. Stay classy, Frostburg. Stuff.